Welcome to UberCube, where we discuss all things Cube, but with refreshments. This is going to be episode number 3, our Storms of Brewing episode. I am your host, UberBear, aka Anthony Adams. We can invert that at any point in time. And I've got my co-pilot,
Stu. Still with no moniker. I'm just going to be Stu.
And that is acceptable. We're here to kind of talk about a very complex yet interesting, divisive topic, Storm, and we're going to have some, we're going to call it banter, maybe a little bit of a...
So you can say disagreements.
Antagonism.
Sure.
It's going to happen. You're going to hear some, you might hear my voice flare a few times during this episode, a little squeak every time I groan, but, you know, we're going to get through it. We're friends, right?
We are. This is all to be constructive, right? And this, I will say this, the discussion regarding Storm as an archetype in Cube has kind of gone back and forth between Anthony and I and other members of our group for probably the whole time that we've been playing Magic together.
Yeah.
Anthony knows me as a fan of Storm. I think the archetype is incredible. It's been around for 1,000 years, it feels like. So yeah, I think you're going to see me on the pro Storm side of things, and maybe Anthony on the not quite so pro Storm, but you know, we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, but before we get into the topic, we're gonna flow into some preamble stuff. So the first thing we're doing is a tradition here at UberCube.
Absolutely.
Team UberBear.
Team UberBear.
Okay. Yeah. Tonight we are all enjoying Tomatin Highlands Single Scotch Whiskey. It's a 12-year bourbon sherry cask, single malt Scotch. Asked the community. We talked about swords, and the swords have fallen in favor. If you haven't heard that episode, check it out. We reached out, and we've got some feedback on the 2 swords that have not been made in the cycle, and we asked for people to put on their Morrow brains and design some interesting swords that people maybe would want to play with that were reasonable.
Yeah, so these were the 2 missing swords from the cycle. The first one being Dimir, the second one being Gruul. And I will say, we received some phenomenal ideas, and, you know, based on some of the craziness that we've seen from the design team over at Wizards of the Coast over the last few years, maybe some of you guys should be designing cards instead of them. But anyway, yeah, so let's talk about the first one. So the first one is our Dimir sword. Anthony, would you like to...
Yeah. So this one, what I like is some people even got more creative and they gave it names, which, well, they gave it pizzazz.
Yes.
Yeah.
Moxie.
So we have our first one. It is going to be a Dimir sword, and it is the Sword of Creation and Destruction. It's going to cost 3 mana value to cast, and it's going to read as follows. The equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from black and blue. Whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, create a token that is a copy of target creature or artifact that player controls. Then that player discards a non-land, non-creature card equipped to.
I like it. I think that the obviously the creating a token kind of fits the theme real nice.
Yeah.
I like the discard, although I kind of feel that I will say that I spent some time ruminating on this one longer than I did the Gruul one, even though the Gruul kind of fits my playstyle. And I wanted all of my being to be like, just freaking Thoughtseize. Just if it does combat damage, Thoughtseize. Because to me, that's just the epitome of black. It's just such an iconic black card. I can kind of understand why some might think that maybe it'd be a little overpowered, but I like it.
Just feedback on that. I think you might be helping them if they're reanimator.
Sure. Hey, but if you're Thoughtseizing someone, maybe
I'm
you're
going
already
to dump my
them,
big, dumb dinosaur.
Yeah, maybe they've only got one card in hand, and it's Dragon Lord.
Oh, man, you got my fat creature. I guess I have to reanimate it now. Sucks. God, don't do that again.
So that was our Dimir card, which again,
it's pretty sweet.
Sword, again, I got to give a shout out to the name, Creation and Destruction.
It makes sense, actually. Yeah,
beautiful. So the second one,
do that one.
Yeah, so Gruul, which my player group will know that I do tend to like my Gruul. So this one was Sword of Rage and Ruin. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and has protection from green and from red. equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, goad target creature that player controls, then destroy target non-basic land. Its controller may search their library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle.
I actually like this.
I think this is absolutely incredible. Design
EDH.
space is beautiful. I think it's just got it hits all the boxes for me. The non-basic land destruction, sensational. Go and get a basic land, beautiful. I dig
this is elegant.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, you should probably apply.
I think this is a winner for me. Of all the submissions that we had, this one to me was not just the one that I enjoyed reading the most, but also I think the most realistic.
Oh yeah, that one's. I jammed that in a lot of Gruul decks. Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
So Gruul decks.
We had a few other pretty cool ones. One that I wanted to really like was Sword of Reflection and Dread. This was another Dimir, +2/+2. When it deals combat damage to a player, you may exile target creature from that player's graveyard, then create a token copy of that creature, except the token gains whenever this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability. Sacrifice it. I like it.
I think it's pretty cool.
I really do. I think it's really cool. The reason why I like this less than even just the Gruul one, the Gruul one just seems like if you're a good cube drafter, one of the things that you're going to take very highly is mana fixing, right? You're going to take your sharks, you're going to take your dual lands. The ability to be able to, impact that, I'm all about it.
Yeah.
And maybe you're a little bit more reliant on your opponent having a creature. I kind of feel that there could have been maybe an extra element to creating a token copy of something.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that is because I didn't design it. But I do like this one.
I'm going to go with the Gruul one now. So here we go. Same designer, the Sword of Smite and Reclamation. Equipped creature gets +2/+2 and protection from green and red. When a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, you may destroy target non-basic land that player controls and return target land from your graveyard to your hand. That's kind of spicy.
It's wonderful as well. I mean, the Gruul ones really did kind of.
You guys like one of the lands.
Yeah,
so they're angry.
There's more green red players.
Yeah. You Gruul players, you need to calm down. Yeah. A little angry. I don't know how well you do in a social interaction, but you can't just be punching people at parties.
I mean, you can, but you better be prepared for the consequences.
Oh God, you got more land than me. I'm gonna flip your Monopoly board over. That's a Gruul player.
You better be thick. You better
not paying rent,
boy. Yeah. But yeah,
we've got one here from our friend, and he states everyone else is being reasonable. So this shall not be reasonable.
We'll just stick to the effects rather than the reading the whole card. But yeah, all +2/+2. So this one, when equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, deals the same amount of damage to all creatures and planeswalkers. And this creature gains indestructible until the beginning of your next upkeep. Now, I will say this, okay? The first time I read this, I was like, this guy's nuts, whoever's designing this. But the second time I read this, I realized that the effect applies to all creatures and all planeswalkers.
Wait a minute, that's actually kind of... I thought he busted it too.
Yeah, because the first time I was like, what? You just board wiped for doing some combat damage, potentially. Like, that's completely nuts. But no, it's a symmetrical effect. In Gruul, where typically
don't have
indestructibility, are more likely to have some mana dorks, your small red creatures, right? Goblin Guide, Monastery Swiftspear, stuff like that.
Yeah.
You're more likely to be taking out a bunch of your own creatures potentially than the other player.
So but maybe
victory
at any cost is what I would have called this card. But he chose Sword of Rage and Rest. Victory at any cost would have been pretty dope.
I think so too. I dig that.
And Dimir is equipped creature deals combat damage to a player. Choose a card type. Each opponent exiles a card of the chosen type from their hand and reveals cards from the top of their library until reveal a card of the chosen type and exiles that card. Man, this wordy.
It's magic. It can be.
Yeah, is this from Alpha and Beta? I can't read this card. Opponent returns the reveal cards at random on the bottom of their library. So we've got a Dimir one that's Surveil 2, run a creature card from your graveyard to your hand, and then you lose life equal to its mana value.
Love that.
Reasonable.
Absolutely love that. And I love Surveil. We talked about this when we first saw the submissions. I think Surveil is a wonderful mechanic, so I dig this.
Yeah. And then we've got a Gruul sword with Naturalize attached to it, and then +1/+1 counter to the creature when it hits.
I like that too.
So yeah, it's incremental growth. It'll deal with the problem. That one's cool too.
I feel like that's the kind of sword that, once the more powerful and the more potential artifacts and stuff and enchantments, you're going to hit it.
You can get some interaction there. Yeah. I like it. And then we've got, we're going to be our last one here. It's going to be the Dimir sword again. Mill cards until the player that's been struck by said card until they hit a land. You may cast one of those cards using mana as if it were any color.
It's spicy.
And then the last one is going to be the Gruul one. Destroy target artifact or land. Create a 3/1 red-green elemental.
Yeah.
That's spicy. That's spicy.
Very, very sort of on the red side, which red is more on the land destruction. So I think that one is really cool effect. Not quite as much on the green side of the effects as I would like to see. But I think from a power level, I dig it.
Yeah, so I just wanted to thank everybody for the community interaction here. If you're very confused right now and you're on Scryfall, good luck. It's not your fault. You can't find them in your search engines. Yeah, you're not nuts. But this was a fun exercise, and we kind of want to do more stuff like this in the future.
We will. We'll do plenty more of these.
Yeah, just try to. And if you have, and by the way, if anybody has any suggestions of like cool exercises we can do during this podcast,
absolutely,
like the one we just did,
hit us up.
Interaction is the key to magic.
At Twitter. You know where we are. At NCG.
All right. NCG it is time for us to move on to our actual topic now.
All right. So here we are. The divisive, as you called it, topic. Storm.
Yes.
All right. So first of all, what is Storm? So pretty straightforward. It's a triggered ability on a spell. And basically, you just copy it for each spell that's been cast before it that turn. That includes your spells as well as your opponent's spells. Right. And that's it. Pretty straightforward. Mm-hmm. So first thing we're going to talk about are the ingredients to a Storm deck. Number one, fast mana. Pretty straightforward. That can be everything from rituals to marks, Black Lotus, Lion's Eye Diamond, all that kind of stuff. Anything that allows you to generate mana quickly and efficiently, you want to be about it. The second thing is going to be tutors, demonic tutor, vampiric tutor, mystical tutor, all that kind of stuff. All of those can be great enablers for Storm. Hand disruption and counter magic, definitely on the hand disruption side, I am a huge fan of sticking as much of the hand disruption spells in your Storm deck as possible. Counter magic is a bit of a doozy on top of that. And then finally, obviously, you want your win con and your finishes.
Now, it's important to notice that as this mechanic has evolved, the idea of storm or storming off has also become synonymous with playing a lot of spells during a singular turn.
Yeah.
So you're basically stacking on top of your previous spells, and people are storm counting, but they may not actually be going for the actual goal of a storm finisher.
Right. You're just trying to do a whole bunch of stuff on your turn.
But the stacking can bluff the idea that you're going to storm off. So people will do that as a tactic, basically. And you'll see it happening. So anyway, so we're going to move on to the pros and the cons of the idea of having a storm archetype added to your cube environment. So pros, complex lines. Players like advanced trains of thought while playing.
You could kind of fit this as a pro and a con, but I definitely think it's more of a pro than a con.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. It's a complex and difficult archetype to navigate.
Considering that Magic is one of the most complex games in the world, if not the hardest game in the world, I can see where people would gravitate towards the idea of doing very complex, linear. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's a fan favorite.
Yeah.
Now that's loose. That's a one-sided fan favorite, being the fan that's storming, right?
Well, no, I agree with that it is a fan favorite. Like we talked about this at one point. If you show up to, someone's house and you're like, hey, I've got my vintage cube with me. And they're like, you know what? This is so convenient because we're all massive cube enthusiasts. We love playing some vintage cube. And they draft the deck or they draft the cube and they say, you know what? I haven't. And you haven't seen any storm, supported in that. What's going on?
I will say that as a 540 curator, I have chosen to omit it for the time being. I have tested it in the past, but we'll talk about that. Let's move on to some more pros. You get to run the fast mana, the Power 9. You can, if you have copies of it, etc., or versions in your cube, it does, give give you access to that.
They give you amazing value.
And really, this archetype thrives in that environment.
Sure.
It's looking for that.
Yep.
And I put down wheel effects because I like wheel effects. I like the idea of time twisters. I like Wheel of Fortunes, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I just think they're really fun, and I think it kind of highlights but also cross pollinates with other archetypes within the cube. Cons, and this is my feelings.
As right or wrong as they may be.
Yeah, my feelings are entitled to be wrong, but they're probably not. Lacks interaction. When I said that this is, it's kind of like you go into a sports event and you're just in the stands because the other player is out there on the field. That is the thing.
You're gold fishing.
You are,
in essence, you're gold fishing. Now, I will say that more so in a paper environment, that you're going to see the lax interaction maybe becoming a bit more of a factor, right?
I can see that.
If you're playing online, you're not necessarily playing against the same player against a player that's drafted in the same cube as you, so they might have access to some of the same spells that you have.
That's actually a good point.
So if you've taken highly, which you should, cards like Force of Will that are going to be not just anti-storm cards, but just anti-anything cards, I would take those fairly highly if I was drafting Storm.
Inquisition of Kozilek, etc.
Yeah, Inquisition, Thoughtseize, the whole 9 yards. If you've taken those in a paper environment where there's only one, that's amazing for you, but online, not necessarily the case.
Additional cons, we said it before, complex lines. This entire archetype can be frankly intimidating.
Yeah,
this is
not an easy deck to play.
It's not noob friendly. I mean,
it's not.
It takes a while to build up and understand because the storm count alone has so much complexity that it requires monitoring on both sides of the fence. While the other player may be storming off, you as the opponent, you have to be keeping an eye on it because it's complicated and you need to be watching their steps.
Yeah. Do you want to judge hovering over your shoulder?
Yeah.
Or, kind of trying to go
in a paper environment, this is brutal.
Yeah,
it's probably a lot cleaner on MTGO because
you got everything tracking.
Software is doing it for you. But there's a lot going on here. And that's where the complex lines can be intimidating because the new player is sitting across the table watching you go, storm count, whatever. I don't even know what Storm 3 did.
Yeah. What's Storm? What do you mean you're copying those spells? What do you mean you get to play that for 0 mana and recur that from your graveyard?
What does Lion's Eye die? I don't know. He's emptying his hand? Yeah.
So I've got a scavenging ooze. What the hell do you think you're doing?
It is not fun to be on the other side of the fence. So you really have to pay attention. So it does require, even though you're not engaged with the lines of play, you need to be watching, like a hawk.
Agreed.
The overall cost of adding the pieces, a lot of these cards that are in the Storm package now, they're up there in dollar signs. So that can be a factor in your choice to run this.
Absolutely. They're not cheap, but I would also counter that with if you're playing green, then you know what's a real nice card when you're playing green is Gaia's Cradle. You seen the cost of the Gaia's Cradle recently?
Is it bad that I went with the Squirrel Storm Core and immediately in my brain?
Probably not, but if I'm playing green, I would love to have me a Guy's Cradle in the deck. Darn, if that thing ain't shot up in price.
Yeah, you're like, what are you doing? I'm Chatterstorming immediately in my head. I think there's probably Chatterstorm going right now in my brain.
But yeah, you're absolutely right. The cost of some of these has gone crazy. We talked about Lion's Eye Diamond. That was a relatively inexpensive card for a long time, and certainly
like $5. It became
it was cheap. It was cheap. It was cheap.
Yeah.
You don't want to. Excuse me, I can get 3 mana for free. Wow, that's amazing. Hang on, I have to dump my hand.
You do.
I don't want to do that. What the hell am I going to do with that mana? I want to cast spells, not just have an empty hand.
Yeah.
Obviously.
I can see that being
not a problem.
The other part, and I know I'm overly focusing on the cons, requires key pieces, but low density, right? You have to have consistency within a singleton environment for people to hit these pieces. And I didn't want to lead people down a path, make traps for them where they're seeing integral parts of the storm component. But as the draft is rotating on the table in an 8-man draft, if pieces start getting snagged or people are looking at it as a potentially open lane, if you're not cutting them off, you can start losing that. In addition to, you're only really, drafting 180? Am I get that right? Of my 540 in a group, depending normally what we do.
It could be. I mean, there's different ways, right? You could do 4 packs. You could, so you could be only.
You could be missing pieces of the spectrum.
Sure.
So it's hard to roll that over another. Yep. Yeah. So that kind of leads into the cross pollination issue with the archetype. A lot of those rituals, while they're great and they are kind of a way to fast stream your play lines, they also aren't very versatile in a lot of decks, or they can't be, except for which ones do? Dark Ritual.
Dark Ritual.
Yeah, we got to pause there. You shouldn't have paused so long on that one. That's a really great card. That card is one of the ones that I, in fact, run without running Storm, just because it's so versatile.
Dark Ritual is an amazing card.
It helps me cheating my Grizz Daddy.
To be able to run
gets my Grizz Daddy in fast. That's what I'm doing with it.
Sure.
Yeah, or my Citadel. We'll talk about that shortly.
Listen, that's one of my pet cards. You don't need to tell me about Citadel.
And then this kind of goes back to the complex lines that we had discussed previously, storm counting. As a paper version of this, you're requiring both the player who's doing the storm counting, but you also need to be auditing their storm count. So that means both players need to understand the lines of play.
There's dice, you know. There's dice. You can keep track.
And this is kind of one of those archetypes. You have to, you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Because people sit there, and I'm sitting there and watching you storm count 7, and I don't know if I really need to hang out for episode 19 because it's coming, right? If you want to watch, that's neat, but it can be painful. Sometimes I've watched them.
Sure. Something, and I want to mention one. This was not on the original list when we talked about this. But again, this is something that's not going to be an issue, I think less of an issue if you're online drafting, like on Moto, for example, compared to if you're paper drafting, is hate drafting. If I'm sitting down at a table, I got 8 players and I know 1 or 2 of them, maybe I'm not very familiar with Storm. Maybe I have really no idea how to play a Storm deck, but I've played with this group enough to know that, man, that guy and that guy over there, they know how to draft this Storm, and I lose on turn 1. I don't want to lose on turn 1. Do you maybe open yourself up to hate drafting a little bit? Then I'll take, a Tendrils, a Brain Freeze.
Yeah,
something like that. Maybe one of those win
You can
cards.
Speculate on it. Maybe
you can speculate, absolutely. And you know what? 4 mana Storm for Tendrils, for example.
Sure.
It might not be the worst thing in the world to take. Maybe you want to gain a couple of life, drain your opponents for a couple of life. Not the best way to use the card, but I think it's worthy of
it's a playable card outside of a Storm.
It's worth mentioning enough as a card.
Yeah, that's fair. I couldn't sit there. Like, you could use it to get that final push through. So I'm going to let Stoom talk about the types of Storm decks that we're going to focus on for this episode now. So there's a large amount of Storm decks that could possibly exist in the Magic world.
Yep.
But we're going to focus on 6 right now, or just to try to keep this episode clean, because man, the combinations and permutations of the word storm off, it's absurd.
Yeah, and I will say that when we talked about this earlier, right? Storm has become a little bit more than just the Storm mechanic, right?
Yeah.
And trying to win with the Storm cards. So first thing that normally comes to my mind is a mono black or a blue black or a Grixis style Storm deck. So I'm using... If I'm going all black, I'm going heavy as much as I can on the fast mana, the hand disruption, the ritual, dark ritual, into the just trying to get all the critical spells up, Yawgmoth's Will, the whole 9 yards, get to 9, cast Tendrils, win. Then there's blue black. You can do a little bit more with blue. You can do a little bit more with blue, black, red. Red, you've got a little bit more access to rituals. Blue, you've got some access to counter magic. So there's definitely arguments for all 3 different types of archetypes.
So the 6 that we've constructed for this episode, and we're going to what we're going to do is we're going to lay out what the ones we're going to talk about. Then we're going to just kind of go over the role players, and then we're going to walk you through how it might look. So we're going to focus on some very specific Storm decks that we've decided to talk about and design for this particular episode. So number 1, we'll cover the Storm Tendrils Mono Black, and it's going to be the Perfect Storm. And we're going to cover the Perfect Storm Tendrils Grixis. And then we're going to cover Halfway Storm. And if you're asking yourself what I mean by that is you basically do the damage up front, and then you're using a Storm card as a finisher, for example, like in a Rakdos deck where you've already gotten some damage in, but you couldn't quite get lethal, but the Tendrils just kind of wraps up the game. So we're going to coin that.
Last 6
last
damage,
6.
something like that.
It's kind of like you're hobbling on that last leg, and you just need to knock it off, okay? And then we're going to talk about Citadel Storm, and we're going to talk about Grizz Daddy Storm, which I like.
Grizz Daddy.
It's a real thing. And then we're going to talk about some other variants like Thousand Year Storm, Expansion Explosion, and then we've got one where we're doing a Brain Freeze loop where you're self-milling yourself. So before we get going, I'm going to let Stu talk about our A-team, or we probably should label this the S-tier role players.
S-tier. Absolutely. They're not A-team, right? Yeah. They're not driving around in a van, like, fighting crime. These are your absolute gods of Storm, right? So, first of all, I already mentioned it, Tendrils, right? Tendrils of Agony. It's a sorcery, 2 colorless, 2 black. Target player loses 2 life, and you gain 2 life. Storm. They gain 2 life, again, really only going to be impactful if you're looking for this as a more supporting card rather than a finisher. But this is the way, if I'm drafting Storm, this is the way I want it.
I see it in that halfway Storm thing I was talking about.
It can be if you're trying to stay alive, maybe a bit of the value Tendrils. Yeah, you've done some. I can see this more maybe if you're black, obviously, victory at any cost.
Right.
Maybe you've got, Bob on the battlefield, you've taken some damage, maybe a mana crypt, and you're like trying to stay alive, trying to finish him off. Maybe that 4 or 6 extra life from the Tendrils might help.
And our next one is Brain Freeze.
Wonderful.
And for 1 blue and 1 colorless, it's an instant. Target player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into their graveyard. Storm. Now, that one's going to be another S-tier card, and those are the ones that are going to be synonymous when you're talking about Storm. That's what players are looking to find in your cubes, etc. So now we're going to move over to the, as we labeled S-tier, we're going to call them the A-team. But now we're going to move into the B-team players, and I'm going to let Stu cover this subgroup.
Yeah, so these are, all right, if we're going to call the first couple of cards Tendrils and Brain Freeze kind of the S-tier, then we'll call these the A-team, all right? First of all, Mind's Desire.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with this being an A rather than S, even though, oh my God, I think Mind's Desire is such an amazing card. Shuffle your library, exile the top card of your library until the end of the turn. You may play that card without paying its mana cost. Storm. This card is completely bonkers.
Yeah.
Sure. I don't mind seeing it. Obviously, you're going to need to see it in a Dimir deck.
Costs 6.
It costs 6.
Yeah.
I'm playing Storm. I want to win much earlier than I have access.
I think it's great. I think
mana.
this is more of an EDH role player for me. This is a very late game Storm.
It's a super cool card. It's just, it's.
You can put some dump trucks out there though off of this. I mean,
it's so good. It's so good.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun. It's very flavorful, I guess, even more, and it's more if for argument's sake, it's a little bit more interactive than the other previous ones.
I would agree with that. Yeah. And for me, when I'm looking at a Mind's Desire, I'm trying to do something a little more interesting because I like to draft for fun, right?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to. If I've got a Mind's Desire, you know what I want to do? I want to put big stupid stuff out there.
It's not competitive Storm at that point.
No, I want to. Well, it can be, but I'm probably not just trying to get 9 in the stack and Tendrils when I've got Mind's Desire.
Right.
Even though it absolutely can. Like, don't get me wrong. But for me, if I've got Mind's Desire, and this is just, again, my fun kind of side of drafting, I'm trying to just do something.
The next one I want to do is going to be Chatter Storm because that's like an everyday occurrence for me. It's going to be 1 green and 1 colorless, create a 1/1 green squirrel creature token, and with Storm. Yeah, no, this is not super powerful, but this is fun. And dude, this art is bananas.
I was going to say the same thing. Anytime I get to put a card down that has a squirrel with glowing gold eyes, I'm happy.
Yeah, so I have a 2-headed giant cube that we've kind of alluded to in the past, and I run an entire Storm suite in there with, a squirrel suite with Chatter Storm. I run that as a secondary pair, so when it matches up off your partner, as we talked about with how Storm works, every spell that's cast during a turn adds to the Storm count. So in a 2-headed giant environment, say Stu and I are versus 2 other schmucks in our group, we can pair off of one another, and then he can increase my Chatterstorm count, which then I will either use this to an overrun effect or throw him with a Goblin Bombardment if that's where we're at in the game.
To follow on with Chatterstorm, Empty the Warrens. Empty is a pretty iconic Storm card, right? Ton of red goblins on the battlefield. Certainly has got all kinds of potential to combo with other
makes
cards.
2 red goblins.
It does
to the
make
one.
2. So from a Storm perspective, if I'm trying to go off, it's something like Goblin Bombardment. But are you running Goblin Bombardment?
I am, in fact.
Another one with super cool art and a pretty iconic card.
I want to talk about this next one because it's funny, because I want to give a little bit of a jab at one of our good friends. Maybe I'll help him out here. Maybe I'm going to help him out with his investment.
Okay.
And the next card is Temporal Fissure. And it is for 1 blue and 4 colors. Return target permanent to its owner's hands. Storm. Mm-hmm. We have one of our really great friends that we've been coaxing to try to come on this podcast. His name's Kevin. Are you familiar with Kevin?
Yes, I'm.
He's got books of these in foil. So if you guys are looking to press these prices, he is speculating on that market.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is banned in.
Hence the speculation.
It's banned in Pauper.
Correct.
And he is relatively convinced that the day that this gets unbanned, this card is going to be like Bitcoin level.
This is his Dogecoin.
This is his retirement. This is his
He's going to one day.
This is his GameStop stuff.
Yeah, he's going to just drop these binders off at some random card shop and walk away with the wealth.
He's not doing any of those.
None of that's happened. It's not real.
He's not doing any of those things.
Our next one I'm going to let Stu do. And this is more of an EDH card, but this is fun. I like it.
Ignite Memories. It's a cool card. I would never run it.
It is 1 red, 4 colorless. Target player reveals a card at random from his or her hand. Ignite Memories deals damage to that player equal to the card's converted mana cost. That is a cool EDH card.
It's a cool card.
At best.
It's a cool card.
If you're running it, though, not
That's all it is.
Yep. And then we've got some Grape Shot.
Grape Shot. Again, I think it's more of an EDH card. I like it. I think I run it myself. It's a win con in one of my EDH decks.
If I were desperate, I'd use that half measures kind of storm.
I would hope that we're not desperate enough to be running Grape Shot in the storm.
You might do it.
At least.
So in my first iteration of my storm, that's been since just totally taken out of my cube. Man, I went bananas with all these things. I just basically, I think I went to Strife all the time, typed in the word storm, and like, yeah, that says storm on it.
That explains why you would run that card.
This is when I was a new curator. I just got started out, and this is before I met Stu, and he didn't realize this, but other people were also approached. Hey, Anthony, why are you running Storm in your power cube? And so I'm like,
and then I came along. And you were like, this guy's right. How did I ever leave this out of my? I just
totally
cube?
caved into the masses, put in this thing, spent a lot of money, bought a Yawgmoth's Will, and put in Storm Entity, thinking because it would do something. I didn't know what I was doing, man. It's just like cards, Storm. Kills. That's what they want. They were asking for it, and they're like,
exactly
"Man,
what they want.
This is terrible. Why would you run this?"
You're
but
crazy.
We're going to move on to some of the C team / support players that we've kind of alluded to. So, Stu?
Yeah, I mean, Goblin Bombardment, again, does amazing if you've got Empty the Warrens or any kind of effect that can create a bunch of tokens, creature, and it deals 1 damage to target creature or player for 1 colorless, 1 red. I definitely think this is a very EDH-centric card.
Yeah.
I love the card. I think it's super strong. Would I run it in a Storm deck? Probably not. And the reason why is because of the falling of favor of token-based strategies from the Storm archetype. Empty the Warrens just isn't the powerhouse that it used to be. I think it's a fine card. I love nothing more than just sacking my permanents to deal damage. Do I think it's powerful? Sure.
Yeah.
But is it good enough? For me, no.
I do run Goblin Bombardment in my power cube because it gives reach to other archetypes.
But exactly. Yeah. Are you running it as a Storm card?
No,
well, obviously not, because you're not.
I'm
even
running it as a supplementary aggro sacrifice.
Yes.
Rakdos kind of role player. I mean, it does work, but I could see if you emptied the Warrens, or even in the case that I mentioned before, when I run Chatterstorm in my 2-headed giant cube. I don't believe I have Goblin Bombardment in there. I just ran it more because it says squirrels.
So we can kind of pause on this section of the discussion to talk about, and we'll go back and kind of go forward because this is going to be a theme, is about how Storm cards find homes in other archetypes. Right. So this is something that we've talked about ad nauseum.
Yeah.
Love me some ad nauseum.
Yeah.
It feels like over the years of us discussing your vintage cube in particular, is that you can certainly make the argument that there's cards that exist that are massive enablers, if not win cons, in the Storm archetype that maybe don't have a particularly good home in other archetypes that you're trying to add to your cube, right?
Yep.
The landscape is changing.
It is.
And we can go back and forward again to a card that we already talked about. Actually, to a card that we're probably going to talk about, which is a particular red enchantment, which is Underworld Breach. Enchantment, 1 colorless, 1 red. Each non-land card in your graveyard has escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard, and then you exile it at the beginning of the end step.
Interesting card. I run it in my Neheb.
Yes, you do.
EDH deck. And when they see this come down, something's about to happen.
It's problematic.
Bad juju.
And what we're seeing that these cards that, and I'll reference Lion's Eye Diamond as probably the greatest example, that was it particularly useful in other archetypes outside of just literally trying to storm off with Yawgmoth's Will.
Yeah.
You could probably argue that it wasn't useful at all outside of trying to do that. Now you can see Underworld Breach. Underworld Breach and Lion's Eye Diamond is absolutely preposterously powerful, right?
Oh, yeah.
Combined with Brain Freeze, which is a common vintage deck. Now we're starting to see that those cards that would have only seen homes if you are adding the Storm archetype to your cube, there's more support for those cards.
But that's kind of back to the what we were saying before about some of these cards struggle to hold their own outside of the archetype. So if you're not drafting it, they lose their place sometimes in what they're trying to do. So like that card would be a fine example. Yeah, could you use that in an interactive way to say get back a low cost interaction like Lightning Bolt, or we over focus on Inquisition of Kozilek, but for example, you could
absolutely,
but it's not the ideal interaction that I'm looking for.
It's not the ideal, but at least it has value there outside of just.
If I get my teeth kicked in, though, I'm making choices.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the next one. The next one we'll do is Walking Ballista, which I'll let Stu read to you.
And I love me some Walking Ballista. So it's an XX artifact creature construct, enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it. Pay 4 colorless, add a +1/+1 counter, and for no cost, remove a +1/+1 counter, deals 1 damage to target creature or player. I'm in love with Walking Ballista. Right. I loved it from the first time that it was spoiled. I run it in my combo deck for EDH. It definitely needs a very high amount of mana to win very quickly, but a wonderful value card.
Well, this is where it can tether into a storm when you're doing this large volumes of mana production, the LED loops that you're doing, and you're building up a large amount of storm count. You can chain them off into a Walking Ballista.
You sure can.
That's why I listed that, which alludes to the next card we're going to talk about is going to be Banefire. It's more of the same.
It is, and I would consider maybe I'm on an island on this one, but I tend to see Banefire as more spot removal. And maybe I'm by myself with that, but I don't think I am. But I look at Banefire, to me, it's spot removal.
For Banefire, people who don't know, it's one red plus X. It's a sorcery that Banefire deals X damage to any target. If X is greater or 5 or more, the spell can't be countered and the damage can't be prevented. That's a big deal when you're playing against Force of Wills.
Yeah, absolutely. Any archetype that you're drafting, you always need to consider counter magic.
I currently don't run this in my Power Adventures environment. It's been in and out. I've gotten feedback, pros and cons on it. At the current time, I'm not, but I do love this card. I run it in my Neheb EDH, which is like a burn spell deck. The next one we're going to move on to is going to be Expansion Explosion. I'm going to let Stu read that one to you and explain why that would be a
double-sided card. Expansion, which is 2 CMC, blue-red, or blue-blue, red-red, or blue-red. Copy target instant or sorcery spell with converted mana cost 4 or less. You may choose new targets for the copy. And then Explosion, which is X, blue, red, red, deals X damage to any target. Target player draws X cards. It's not cheap.
Nope.
The damage is not insignificant.
Nope.
And again, pretty sweet spot removal.
Yeah,
it's an instant.
This is
kind
of
like drawing cards.
This tethers into the Walking Ballista Banefire Expansion Explosion, whereas the Goblin Bombardment's kind of its own little island there, right?
I would agree. Is it a Storm card? I don't think so.
No, these are not Storm cards. These are the reach that you're going to get from back to what we said in the beginning of the episode, is that storm has become a loosey-goose kind of term.
Sure.
So you're storming off into this big explosion.
Yeah, especially if you're trying to generate a whole bunch of mana.
But there is one card that we're about to talk about that's 1,000-Year Storm.
Yeah, 4 colorless, 1 blue, 1 red. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it for each other instant and sorcery spell you've cast before it this turn. You may choose new targets for the copy. Love this card.
Storm doesn't like copying, does it?
No, unfortunately not. But you know what 1,000-Year Storm likes? You know what 1,000-Year Storm likes? It likes rituals.
Yeah, but
it likes Yawgmoth's Will for a tutor that was cheap.
I can see this card.
Anything that I can cast over and over
6
again.
6 mana is so much for me.
It's super expensive.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the payoff is, the person on the receiving end of this is going to be done. This isn't that turn 1 finish. This is that turn, 7?
If I've got 1,000-Year Storm,
it's great.
It's blue-red. Ideally, I'm trying to draft this in a much more controlling deck whereby I can sort of hang out for the first few turns, maybe got a bit of removal in there, land at some point, and then go off the next.
I think it's powerful, but for me, this is a commander card for me. If I had to summarize it, people may not agree.
It needs so much build around for me in a cube environment that I would agree it's more EDH.
So we're still building the idea of Storm. So next we're going to go over some ingredients. We're going a little faster here. I'm going to let Stu kind of just chain through these, but these are the fast mana components.
Yes, exactly. So the fast mana, no surprises. Black Lotus, Lion's Eye Diamond, we talked about that earlier.
Yep.
Kind of a crazy card. Really interesting and odd design space back then for a card like this where you get 3 mana, it costs you your hand. Just wasn't appreciated.
It was kind of a design fail in the way back when.
It does, doesn't it feel crazy? Why would I ever want to discard my hand?
Do you think Jimmy from R&D got fired that day?
I hope not. I hope he got a promotion, but he probably didn't because he probably designed Oko. Mana Crypt obviously speaks for itself. Incredible.
Mana.
Fast mana for 0 is wonderful. The Moxen. Lotus Petal, which I love Lotus Petal.
I do too.
Cracks for any mana. Chromox, again, just any kind of 0 mana artifact or anything else that you get to tap for mana. It's a winner.
The 0 is what gets you the storm count. That was the focus of that whole piece.
Yeah, Sol Ring I didn't include in that list, but obviously Sol Ring is net mana positive, so it deserves to be there.
That's what we're chasing,
Yeah.
So now we're going to move over to some ritual effects, which is another key integral piece of the storm mechanic. This is we're storming off in this episode because this is a complicated episode to cover all the mechanics and the intricacies built into this archetype, right?
Yeah,
so
it sure
bear
is.
with us as we try to bumble our way through the complexities as we discuss them, but we're hoping this is giving you a roadmap.
I mean, it actually, when you sort of strip it down,
Right.
it's extremely straightforward, right? If you're trying to combo off, if you're trying to cast as many spells as possible in the same turn,
You want lightweight, fast, and efficient.
Think about it. There's only 2 things that you need.
Right.
You need mana.
Yep.
You need cards.
Yep.
The rituals don't give you cards, but they do give you mana.
They accelerate you.
They accelerate you, right? So this is the way to just be able to generate a whole bunch of mana, and at the same time, you're generating a whole bunch of storm count.
For the people who aren't familiar how this normally looks is if you're storming off in a paper environment, you're going to have somebody that's going to have a dice rolling over and saying storm count, blah, blah, blah. I've got 3 red in pool. And they're going to roll a dice and say, I've got 2 black in pool. And that's what you're going to be watching is this goes through its different steps and measures.
Absolutely.
And that's where these ritual effects is you're going to be watching those dice kind of flop over. So pay attention to that. You have to keep your auditing skills online.
You do have to keep your wits about you.
Yeah, you got don't let them just go solo.
Exactly. And look, I play effects like this in other formats. I always try to be honest. I'm not, kind of
we're not saying anybody's trying to cheat. We're just saying this is easy to screw up.
It can be.
It's hard. And by the way, on this channel, we have libations. It gets harder. Math is hard.
I kind of check out after about 30 minutes of the first game.
Storm count 17.
Is basically what I'm saying, right? I need to have at least done what my deck was designed to do in the first game or two, because after that, I'm like, who's all?
That's why we love Cube. It's a little bit more expedited. All right, so ritual effects. We're going to cover some of these. It's going to be Dark Ritual. Pay 1, add 3 black mana to your pool. Desperate Ritual. Pay 1 red and colorless. Add 3 red to your mana pool and
Splice onto Arcane, which
yeah.
Yeah.
And then we got High Tide. It's pay 1 blue, and then you till the end of the turn, all islands produce an additional blue whenever they're tapped for their mana.
Not just your islands.
Oh,
everyone's islands.
Oh, wow. I didn't even realize that. Okay. I learned something today. Thank you for allowing me to join the podcast. Magic is hard.
Anthony made this cube about 3 weeks ago, so he's still learning some of these like brand new cards that are coming out like High Tide.
Seething Song, 1 red, 2 colorless, add 5 mana to your pool. I run this in my Neheb EDH because it accelerates them out. But yeah, Rite of Flame, pay 1 red. You can add 2 red to your mana pool, then add 1 to your mana pool for each
card named Rite of Flame. This to me, I know you mentioned this, Singleton. And it's not a singleton.
But some people break singleton, so I felt compelled.
But it's net positive.
It is,
and it's adding to your storm count.
We're gonna skip past culling the week, although I put it in here. It is interesting though. It's sacrifice a creature. You pay 1 to put it 1 swamp to put on the field. Sacrifice a creature. Add 4 black mana to your mana pool. Culling the week's actually a neat card. The next one's going to be Grinning Ingus. That is for 1 red, 2 colorless. You can basically it produces a 2/2 elemental. You can pay 1, return Grinning Ingus to the owner's hand. Add 2 colorless and 1 to your mana pool. Play this ability only during the time you can play a sorcery. It is basically a spell that you drop down. It replaces itself in mana value, and you can loop it. There's a couple others that do that. There's the spirit that does that, etc.
Yeah.
There's some loops.
I mean, it's pretty good if you've got like some kind of, aristocrats effect maybe.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot of infinite loops you can do with this. Yeah. I mean, so during this episode, I kind of just felt like we should mention all the pieces. I was trying to be a little bit more robust here to be considerate. And now we're moving on to our next piece, which is kind of our getting down to how the recipe's making is.
All right. So this is one of the just most absurd cards that's ever been printed, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I love it with all of my being, is Yawgmoth's Will. So this is 2 colorless, 1 black sorcery. Until end of turn, you may play cards in your graveyard as though they were in your hand. Cards put into your graveyard this turn are removed from the game instead or exiled. Forget about it. This is absurd in a Storm deck. Forget just playing a few cards from your hand. Now you get to play a bunch of stuff from your hand. The classic move is you empty your hand, you play Yawgmoth's Will, you crack Lion's Eye Diamond in response to the Yawgmoth's Will to get even more mana. The Lion's Eye Diamond goes to your graveyard, the Yawgmoth's Will resolves, and then you just get to play everything from your graveyard all over again, which ideally is all the rituals, Dark Ritual, Moxen, Black Lotus, all that kind of stuff. Get a bunch of mana. Maybe you've got a tutor. Maybe it's already in your hand. Maybe it's already in your graveyard. But then you get to that 9 storm count for Tendrils of Agony, and bang, you win the game pretty quickly.
So this is actually sparks the most conversations that we have disagreement on. I do not run a Storm Shell.
Boo.
Stu is arguing that I must have Yawgmoth's Will, and I am working extensively to make him understand. Outside of a Storm environment, this becomes an EWIT. Not even a good EWIT, just an EWIT. Have I convinced you?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to. The next one we're going to do is Past in Flames.
Yeah, so this is basically Yawgmoth's Will for instants and sorceries. They gain flashback. Flashback's equal to its mana cost, and it's 3 colorless, 1 red. So it's 1 extra mana than Yawgmoth's Will. It only impacts instants and sorceries, so you don't get the Lion's Eye Diamonds and the Black Lotuses back, but still pretty powerful.
Yeah, it lets you just continue to break the idea of Storm.
Yeah.
And the next one was the one we discussed previously, is Underworld Breach. And for 1 red, 1 colorless, you get an enchantment. Each non-land card in your graveyard has Escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. This was that brain freeze loop that we were talking about before. Oh, and one important part is at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice Underworld Breach. You can loop this silly.
Yeah, so the lines with this are essentially you generate mana, you brain freeze yourself, brain freeze goes into your graveyard,
Yep.
and then ideally you want some fast mana, right? You want
Right.
Black Lotus, you
LED.
want LED,
Yeah.
you cast those, get some more mana, they go to your graveyard, or they're in your graveyard, you exile some spells, you brain freeze yourself again, you get a bunch of more cards into your graveyard, you cast Black Lotus, you cast Lonzo Diamond again, you brain freeze yourself again, and you build up a storm count, and then you get to the point where you've got a storm count high enough that you can brain freeze your opponent, and they're drawing dead.
Yeah, it's such a juxtaposition of how you would normally play. You're going to spend more time milling yourself just to build up that count in that scenario, just to finish on your storm count on your opponent, who's, well, I guess they're expecting it at that point.
Yeah, and this is a much newer line because obviously Underworld Breach is a much newer card.
Yeah, it's a pretty wild
Diamond and Yawgmoth's Will and Tendrils of Agony.
I like that. I dig that line.
Super powerful.
That has almost convinced me to put Storm in, but I'm not there. But I was on the cusp.
I would say, and
it's interesting,
and I would agree. It's not just as interesting, but it's very powerful. And again, you're not just adding Lion's Eye Diamond and the rituals and all of those cards that are Storm enablers. And you can certainly make the argument that there's cards that exist that are Storm enablers that maybe aren't quite as effective in other archetypes. Underworld Breach is yet another card that unlocks the potential.
This card is powerful.
It's incredible.
So we're going to move on to our next section of the ingredients. Oh my gosh, this cookbook is huge.
Yes, it is.
So we're going to go on to tutors, basically. In order to get all your pieces to be able to do all this fancy stuff, you got to have the tutors. Or you don't have to, but they're ideal. So we talked about them before, but I'll read them for people who aren't familiar or they're new to the game. One of the major players is going to be Demonic Tutor. For 1 black and 1 colorless, you get a sorcery. Search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle. I mean, that's self-explanatory. You go get whatever you want out of your library. It's now in your hand.
Sounds good to me.
I mean, yeah. You get your Storm Win
Love
Con.
me
You
some
get
DT,
your pieces.
baby.
Yeah. So the next one we're going to do is Vampiric Tutor, which I really love this new art. I did dig the old vampire kind of whispering over the young tutor.
I like the
this
art.
Art's awesome.
But I have to. I run the white border.
I got them both.
I only run the old art.
Yeah, they're both fantastic.
I'm traditionalist.
So Vampiric Tutor is for 1 black, you get an instant. Search your library for a card, then shuffle your library and put that card on top of your library, lose 2 life. The next one is Mystical Tutor. Pay 1 blue, instant. Search your library for an instant or source card. Reveal that card, shuffle your library, and put that card on top of it. We have a theme. And the next one was, when I mentioned it, Stu, he's like, why is this on your list of tutors? Tinker. Why is it in there, Stu? What did I tell you?
Listen.
Yeah.
I know full well Tinker is one of... It's a stupidly powerful
Why is that
card.
in a Storm deck? Let's do it. I'm going to make you say it.
Bolus's Citadel. And I know. You know that I love me some Bolus's Citadel. Which, interestingly enough, I've actually taken it out of a couple of my EDH decks recently. It's a wonderful, wonderful card.
I run that card in my I still run it in my Empowered Vintage, but I also run it in my Artifact Cube, even though I'm not storming. Just because I can still feel like I'm storming, right? I can
Absolutely.
go bananas. I can tinker that up and go nuts.
I want a Blightsteel Colossus. Forget anything else. If I'm tinkering, I want to put a Blightsteel Colossus on the battlefield.
Yeah, if I have one, you have to draft it first.
I do. And if I have Tinker, you know I'm going hard for...
We're gonna shorten this one up.
Yeah, I don't think we need to sort of reinvent
there's
the
so
Wheel
many
of Fortune.
pieces to Storm. Yeah. Wheel of Fortune effects, Time Spiral, Frantic Search, Memory Jars, anything that's reloading your hands. That's what Storm players want to see. Is they want to empty their hands, draw fresh cards, loop into free spells, loop into cantrips, loop into mana accelerants, hit those pieces, basically getting that Storm count to well up to his peak, and then that's when they drop the bomb.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And similarly with Memory Jar, we haven't talked about that previously, but I love me some Memory Jar.
I just took it recently out of my... So I took it out of my Power Cube recently. Actually, I have 2 copies of it just sitting around the binder doing nothing. I have the fancy foil, and card. I need to do something with it. Yeah, I love the card.
Dump your hand, get a Memory Jar out, crack it, get seven cards for the next turn.
I'll read the cards that we have on here just for... You can look them up on your own because this list is pretty massive. Let's go back up to the top, but it's going to be, I mean, we've got Time Twister, we've got Wheel of Fortune, we got Time Spiral, Frantic Search, Metamorphose. I put in Turnabout, kind of reachy, but it's still a thing. Memory Jar, Dig Through Time. I even put Dramatic Reversal in there. That's getting loose. I get
It's a bit EDH-centric.
Chitaxian Pro, because it's, Phyrexian Mana. Mana Flare, because it's a doubler. Then we already talked about Thousand Year Storm. I mean, these are all cards that are just going to, in layers, they'll make you just explode off. So now we're going to go over, we talked about previously the Storm variants, and we're going to do a play-by-play. We're going to walk through the steps, and I'm going to let Stu start out with the first one. We're going to call him Storm.
Stu?
Go ahead, Stu.
You're desperate for me to
all right, so Stormy Stu is going to call out a complex line for mono black, perfect Storm, turn 1 kill. Go.
So, yeah, this is pretty straightforward. I did this for a mono black, and I don't necessarily need to track the storm count. You can do this if you're particularly interested. But it was Lotus Petal, Thoughtseize, Black Lotus, Dark Ritual, Demonic Tutor, Lion's Eye Diamond with Yawgmoth's Will. Obviously, respond to your own Yawgmoth's Will with cracking the Lion's Eye Diamond for triple black, Dark Ritual, Lotus Petal, Thoughtseize, and then Tendrils of Agony. So that is the perfect 9-card or 9 spells.
Turn 1 kill.
9 spells and then Tendrils for 10.
We will include this recipe in the show notes because we tried reading this out loud and it's nuts. I mean, he went through Storm Count. What'd you get? Storm Count 9.
I mean, obviously, I'm very familiar with Storm, so it's very, very easy for me to just write it out.
So we put a challenge out there to some of our friends. I'm like, man, I need you to write me the perfect Storm recipe. I want a mono black and I want a Grixis. So Stu did the mono black, our buddy Kevin did the Grixis, and we're going to move on to the Grixis one now. Let's go through that recipe. We're going to try to make it a little cleaner. We're just going to call out the cards. So we're going to do a turn 1 perfect Grixis. This is Magical Christmas Land, folks. Tendrils, Storm Kill. No lands, Storm Count 10. This is pretty bonkers.
Yeah.
Turn 1, Black Lotus. Break for 3 black mana. Dark Ritual. Demonic Tutor for Tendrils. LED. Break for 3 red mana. Past in Flames, Dark Ritual, Yawgmoth's Will, Black Lotus, LED, break LED for 3 blue, Ancestral Recall, break LED for 3 black, Tendrils. So anyways, what we're trying to show you in this, the exercise, and I know it's a bit absurd, is we went through and did the perfect formula of how you would do that, and it was with no lands. It's kind of why I hate Storm, for not going to lie. We drafted for, 50 minutes, and you just beat me in 2?
Yeah.
That's fun for all.
Yeah, it's my fun. I don't care
Let's
if you're
scoop it up
fun.
and draft again for another hour.
Listen, I can put a movie on if you want to have fun, right? I want to storm off.
So we're going to do Perfect Storm, Brain Freeze, turn 1. I mean, we're doing this, dude, guys, we're just doing this for fun.
Yeah.
I mean, so something silly.
So I like this because it's Brain Freeze, and Brain Freeze I think is super cool. So this is Swamp, Dark Ritual, Lion's Eye Diamond into Yawgmoth's Will, crack the LED for black.
Holding priority.
Obviously holding priority with Yawgmoth's Will. You're getting 3 black. LED from the yard, crack for 3 blue. Dark Ritual, Brain Freeze, remand it back to your hand. Incredible. And then Brain Freeze again.
Yeah, for
GG.
It mills them for 24.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, so the next one we're going to talk about is Halfway Storm. Basically, you're going to put pressure on, then you're going to close the storm, or close the death with, say, a storm kill with Tendrils. So the idea is, for instance, like with Rakdos, Goblin Rabblemaster, you're basically going to bolt them, you're going to fire blast them, you're going to march forward as far as you can go, and you're going to layer it so you can get as many spells on the stack. You're going to hit Incinerates, like I said before, bolts, whatever. You're going to pressure them, and this is kind of like, how do you complete that loop? Well, with Tendrils of Agony. Well, while this is not an ideal storm situation, and I know it's a real reach, it's whenever you've grabbed that 1 extra card as a 23rd and you want to find a home, you need a finisher because you need to grab a little further than you could hit before.
I think it justifies even further the existence of the storm cards in the cube, right?
I mean, I could see running
next time we draft.
So, as a side note, before we continue off to the next one past Halfway Storm, is I have considered making a Storm module.
I think this is.
I can do it.
I think it's wonderful. I
It's peer
think
pressure,
we
guys. Peer
probably should save this for another episode.
Yeah.
Question mark?
Module construction?
Modular
Yeah.
cube construction?
Yeah, it's a thing. Well, it's already been covered by other podcasts. I think you can go into more, but it is a thing. People build modular
Absolutely.
cubes where they rotate them around. I don't have that time to maintain that kind of database.
That's just not
this
true.
is hard
You've got
enough.
nothing better to do. I know your life. You got nothing better to do.
So the next one that we're going to go over it's one of my personal favorites, is Citadel, basically Top Storm. And what you're going to do with this is you're going to play Bolas Citadel, which is going to be the key player here. And so for 3 black and 3 colorless, you may look at the top card of your library at any time. You may play the top card of your library. If you cast a spell this way, you pay life equal to the converted mana cost rather than pay its mana cost. Then you can tap it, sacrifice 10 non-land permanents. Each opponent loses 10 life.
That activated ability
It's amazing.
of Bolas' Citadel is understated. Let me tell you. It's very powerful.
Well, that's the key part here for this version of Loosey Goosey Storm. It's complemented best by Sensei's Divining Top, which is, if people are not aware, you pay 1 colorless, you produce an artifact. You pay 1, look at the top 3 cards of your library, then put them back in any order. Or you can tap it, draw a card, then put Sensei's Divining Top back on top of its own library. What this allows you to do is top deck manipulation, allowing Bolas
Sure does sound like nice with Aetherflux Reservoir.
Correct.
Just saying.
Correct. I've seen people actually
Just
run that
saying.
some keeps. What it does is it allows you to manipulate the top dock of the library, top card of the library, so that you can get those key components. And you can drop out this just massive. You can either storm off of this, for example, hitting all your pieces, or you can just hit creature counts or whatever.
Yep.
And then, as Stu mentioned before, that tap part's no joke. Even if you can't get the reach with the storm components, with i.e. Tendrils, etc., you could just, at the end of the day, tap that, hit them, blast them for an additional 10 that you've already done. It hits in that halfway storm thing, too.
It does. And now you only need 4 spells cast previously,
Correct.
and then Tendrils, and you win.
And then flop it over.
And
Blow up your lands, everything. Non-land, excuse me. It's non-land permanents. But all the same.
Non-land, but, whatever.
It gives you reach.
It does.
I love this card.
I love Bolas' Citadel.
You can hit it with Tinkers, I teased you about before.
Exactly.
It's a real
Tinker
card.
into Bolas' Citadel. I mean, that's a
thing.
It's a vintage strategy.
It's not the
powerful.
ideal situation for that, but for me, I love that lineup.
I am never going to be unhappy to have a Bolas' Citadel online. It's a stupidly powerful card.
Yeah. So we're going to move to the next recipe that we.
And I will say, Sensei's Divining Top, love it. Here's why I don't. It slows games.
Oh yeah.
Down. There's a reason why it was banned in Legacy. You're just spending so much time spinning the top.
Yeah. I mean, EDH, it's a little. Well, I mean, if we're making an argument about time, fetch lands, tutors, dude. We literally talked about those like they're normal. They slow down the game.
Sure.
But yeah, top for an inexperienced player, it definitely becomes molasses for a game.
It does.
They need to have a plan. You're stacking on purpose, not just because you want to know.
That's fair.
Yeah.
All right, so last we're going to talk about is Grizzlebrand, Grizz Daddy Storm. Essentially, Grizzlebrand. So Grizzlebrand Storm is, you want to get Grizzlebrand out as quickly as possible. It's a 4 colorless, 4 black, flying lifelink, flyer, 7/7, pay 7 life, draw 7 cards. It's a great Storm enabler. You just get a bunch of cards in your hand.
It's an individually fantastic card.
Yes.
But we decided to latch this on because Grizz Daddy Storm's real.
Absolutely.
You could launch off here. So we kind of did some lines of play. So like turn 1, Dark Ritual, Entomb, search for Grizzlebrand, then exhume them or animated at them, put Grizzlebrand onto the battlefield, pay X life, draw X cards, Lotus Petal, Memnite, whatever, Putrid. I mean, you can go nuts.
Yes.
And hit all your triggers, and then just grand finale, drop Tendrils, 20 life. I mean, you can. Yeah, the risk is that you're burning your life. I mean, you're hitting yourself pretty hard here. But those wheel 7s that you're getting for the pay 7 life out of Grizzlebrand.
But yeah, it's a stupidly powerful creature, regardless. Even outside of any kind of storm.
You can chain off pretty nuts here.
Yeah, it's a 3-turn clock.
Yeah. So that I hope this has been a complex conversation.
That's kind of what I wanted out of a storm episode, though, right? Because it's a complex archetype. It's a very difficult archetype to draft. It's a difficult archetype to play.
It's a difficult archetype to podcast.
It's sure, yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. It's been wonderful though.
It's exciting and fun, and as I said before, I have considered building a modular portion. I didn't want to take the additional real estate within my 540 vintage cube to add this.
He will.
But I will in time. But
I'm drowning him if he doesn't.
Yeah, I've got 2 players out of like 8 that says thumbs
up. That's 25%. So. If I gave you 25% odds to win the lottery, would you play the lottery?
Yes,
of course you would.
Yes, I would. Yes,
there you go.
All right, so we want to do some shout-outs here real quick. One of our big shout-outs is we want to say thank you to everybody who contributed to the swords.
Yeah, everyone who added a submission to the swords episode. Thank you guys so much. That was on the Twitter at UberCubeMTGPod and also on our Discord. Wonderful submissions. Thank you guys for contributing. That was really fun to read.
Totally creative. They were exciting. All of them are realistic. I would actually draft them and play them, if not in Cube, but definitely in EDH. But man, good submissions. Great submissions. Loved it. The next shout I want to do is to our local LGS. Game Theory. It's in Raleigh, North Carolina. It's at 5910 Raleigh Road, Suite 125. Absolutely love this store. This is where I try to get almost all of my cube supplies, sleeves,
playmat, singles,
foils. Want to go out and jam some games.
Absolutely.
It's just, I love this place. Yeah,
great store.
I try to make it my regular Thursday pit stop. But yeah. If you're in the area, I recommend stopping by and checking it out. I absolutely love Game Theory. That's pretty much it for a how to reach us kind of things. Who's going to read that out?
Yeah, absolutely. As always, reach out to us. Hit us up on Twitter at UberCubeMTGPod. You can also hit us up via email at UberCubeMTGPodcast@gmail.com. And we also have a link to our Discord on Twitter as well. So come by, join us, hang out with us, and talk about all things Cube and Magic. And really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It was a lot of fun making it.
Yeah, and it was really fun. And as always, happy cubing.
Happy cubing.
Peace out.
Bye.